First of all, I want to welcome everybody and good afternoon. And our learning outcomes today for learning, building a culture of data use in your schools are that participants are going to learn how to set expectations, to develop a culture for using data in their organization and engaging teachers, staff, students, parents, and external stakeholders with the data. And, I'm going to talk a lot about some practical things to do in your school, but I just have to say, after listening to Father Mike yesterday and Gloria this morning, that, wow, when Father Mike was talking about you can have a shoe factory that has beautiful, wonderful equipment and beautiful materials, but if you don't produce any shoes at the end of the day, that kind of what's the point? And I was thinking about that in our, in our schools as well. If we have these great schools and we're doing all this work, but we don't have disciples that leave our school, what's the point? And then he was talking about us being prototypes, and I thought, oh my gosh, what a lot of pressure, but what a gift as well, right? So, as we go through today, just put everything that I talk about today within that context, because that really got me to thinking about everything that I prepared for you today. Again, remembering what are we here for and what are we really doing? But in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving. I wish we were live so we could have a lot more discussion about all of this. But then the NESPECs outline 4 areas for effective Catholic schools. And in order to know how effective your school is, you need data. For mission and Catholic identity, you may collect data through surveys, analyzing the time spent on religion class and observances, or documenting service opportunities. For governance and leadership, you may have an organizational chart to identify the roles and responsibilities of the pastor, the principal, the school board, or the council. Perhaps you've collected information through surveys of the parents or parish community. For operational vitality, you would use your budget information, study and document enrollment trends, and create a plan for maintenance and improvement of the facilities. I'm going to focus on the academic excellence piece today, particularly on assessing student learning and growth. In my role at NWEA, before I came to NWEA, I was a Catholic school principal for like over 24 years, and I've been really blessed at NWEA. I've been here for 6 years, and I work exclusively with Catholic schools across the country. So I've had the opportunity to lead panel discussions around our topic today. And these panels included leaders from different dioceses and schools across the country. So the information that I'm sharing with you today is gathered from these experts who have shared their best practices, as well as from articles, blogs, research, and some personal experience. So first of all, you need to have your expectations. If you don't know where you're going, you won't know if and when you've arrived. So identifying student learning outcomes is crucial for getting started. In your classroom, you start with the standards for your grade level and subject area. These are unpacked, and the skills and knowledge needed to meet the standards are defined. At the school level, there may be some common goals, such as improving math computation in grades 3 through 5, or ensuring all kids in K through 2 are on track for reading. So the first step is identifying the outcomes. Then you gather your data. The more information you have about what's needed to meet the outcome, the better. For example, if your goal is to increase enrollment, then you're going to look at all the factors impacting enrollment. You'll need data on the demographics of the parish and the neighborhood to know how many school-age children there are currently and the projections for the next several years. You'll need to look at the financial aspects. You'll answer questions such as, what is the median outcome of the parish in the neighborhood? What amount of tuition and fees are feasible? What staffing will be needed? For your academic goals you'll want to achieve, you'll need data on student learning. With the balanced assessment system, you'll have many data points to identify overall trends in your school, your classroom, and with individual students. When you have the data needed regarding the student outcomes you want to achieve, you can make decisions on what support is needed to achieve those outcomes and allocate your resources and time accordingly. Assessments should be balanced, and we'll look at that more in a minute. With assessments, it's important to always support good practice and ethical use. For example, when you administer interim assessments 2 to 3 times during the year, like MAP growth, you may have some others, but that's the one I know. You want to ensure that the testing conditions are as similar as possible within the year and year over year. For example, if you rush the testing in the fall, telling the kids that as soon as you're done, you can go out to recess, but not offering that fun thing to do in the spring, means they could take more time and do a better job on the test in the spring. So this could artificially inflate your growth scores. For the most accurate data, it's important to use really good practices. There are a lot of different student information systems and, and grade book. There are a lot of different grade book and student information systems that you can use. And I encourage you to really look at some of those. Assessments in your classroom should be balanced. Formative assessments are those practices that you use every day while the students are on the road to mastery. You need information about what prior knowledge students have and to diagnose their learning during instruction to respond to students' needs and adjust what comes next in your lesson or unit. Interim assessments will allow you to monitor progress and growth throughout the year and check for understanding and gaps. Summative is that check for mastery and that test of learning that has taken place. There are hundreds of strategies for formative assessment and practices, and WEA offers professional learning in both assessment literacy and formative assessment. Here are some of the types of workshops with a sample of some of the strategies. There's activating learners, clarifying learner strategies, eliciting evidence, and providing feedback. If you're interested in any of these, you can just reach out to me. Interim assessments, just as those in our MAP suite, are designed to administer 2 to 3 times a year. MAP suite consists of MAP growth and MAP reading fluency. You can see that they're both designed to give 3 times a year in the fall, in the winter, and the spring. Summative assessments are tests of learning. They measure mastery and are typically used at the end of a unit or a course. Let's just take a moment to reflect and write down the student learning outcomes you want to achieve. These could be goals for the remainder of this year or looking forward to next year, or they may be goals that surface during your accreditation or school improvement process, or maybe during this, this weird COVID year. Or perhaps you're preparing your unit or your lesson plans for next year. I want to give you just a few seconds to write down some moments or jot down some ideas of what your learning outcomes might be. We're not going to have a lot of time to do this, so I'm just going to give you a few seconds. And remember, this is all recorded, so if you need to, you can come back and look at this. And if you're watching this with somebody else, maybe you can just talk for a few minutes. So let me give you about 30 seconds to write down some outcomes that you've been thinking about. Okay, so now that we've thought about a little bit of our learning outcomes, now just think about a little bit like, how do you collect that data? And what do you use for formative assessment and interim assessments and the summative assessments? So just take a couple seconds and write that down on what you use. Okay, so now let's get into the meat of what we're going to talk about. How do we get teachers involved? Now, if you are a building leader, you're going to be thinking about, how do I get my teachers in my building engaged with data? If I'm a classroom teacher, think about how I can get other teachers in my building involved, like maybe other grade level teachers, or if I'm the only teacher at my grade level, how do I get maybe the teachers above and below me, like maybe the intermediate teachers or the primary teachers, and engaged? And maybe we're going to look at math, or maybe we're going to look at reading. So be thinking about your team. How can you get your team involved? And it's really important to create a safe environment so everyone can speak and share their ideas without feeling like dismissed or threatened. I know at one of my schools, there was a group of teachers who had banded together and they were very outspoken, and they would make decisions outside of the teachers' meetings without including the others. And when I arrived, there was a perception that was probably true, that these 4 or 5 teachers were the ones who were running the school and getting their way on anything they wanted. And this was really frustrating for all the others. And one way I combated this was to create professional learning committees, and I purposely selected who was going to be on each team. The teams were given specific work to do and had to report their progress to me each time they met. So the feedback I received from many of the teachers was that they loved working in those small groups. They all had valuable input and they could get a lot accomplished. My PE teacher was assigned to a PLC that was charged with developing our student learning expectations for our accreditation self-study. And he became very invested in the process and even told me that this was the most excited that he had been about teaching. And I had him write a summary of the work accomplished during those meetings, and we published that in our newsletter, emphasizing that this time that they spent enabled the teachers to do work that would be helping their students. So having meaningful, trustworthy data will give the teachers information to do their work most effectively. Continue to provide opportunities to learn how to use the data. The more teachers use data, the deeper you'll be able to dive into the information. But we know that professional development is not as effective if you do just a workshop or a one-day event. It has to be continued over time, and you need to schedule that time specifically, or it's easy to have it to go by the wayside. You know, to give the PLC's time to meet, we scheduled one afternoon a month, dismissing the students early. We compensated for the time by extending our school day by a few minutes and shortening a couple recesses and breaks so the instructional time was accounted for. We also had an extended day program and allowed students to attend free for those 3 hours if needed. So for the most part, the parents were on board with the change. Now, it may not be possible for your school to take a half day regularly at this time, so I encourage you to find some consistent time on a regular basis to do the work that's needed. And because we only had one class per grade, my first grade teacher invited first grade teachers from neighboring Catholic schools to come once a month, and they would share ideas and get to know one another. With COVID and everyone getting so comfortable with Zoom, this would actually be easier to accomplish virtually. Our school was accredited, and every 6 years we went through a very involved process reviewing lots of criteria that resulted in a self-study. So by collecting and managing our data each year, whether it was assessment information or graduation statistics and enrollment and demographic information, we were able to use all of that when it came time to write our self-study. Plus, every year we would publish an update on where we were with each goal, what we were currently working on, and what would come next. So be sure to document the work you're doing and keep your data organized. Then when you need to summarize, report, or give a speech, you have your information already at hand. Additionally, you can take 5 to 10 minutes at every staff meeting to have one teacher talk about their MAP data or whatever assessment data you use. They can either show a report they used and talk about what they did differently with students as a result, or share a success story about a student. By taking just a little time at each meeting, it keeps your data on the front burner instead of on the back burner. We'll look at some reports in a minute. It's also important to publicly recognize your teachers and leaders. Like our students, specific feedback on what they're doing well builds your community and that collegiality. This could be as simple as noting some particular work a teacher has done in your weekly newsletter, designating a teacher of the month, or giving them an opportunity to work on a program they're passionate about. So I mentioned taking some time each week to look at your student data. It's easy to look through all your data right after you complete your testing, and everyone's curious about how their students performed. But by coming back to the reports more frequently, you can look at a little bit of information each time and adjust your curriculum and instruction accordingly. Let's take this is our class report. I'm sure you have reports that you have at your school. This can be this is a grade report that you can look at, or a class report. And just for example, if you took a few minutes each time, one of the things you could do is you could look at like the mean for your class, and then at the norm, and see how your class compares to the averages there. You can look at the standard deviation, and start talking about that. If it's greater than 10, that means that you need to do more small groups, more differentiation. If you have a lot of students in the lower quintiles, then that means that you need to do some more focus in those areas. Or if you have students in the higher quintiles, then those are your areas of strength that you want to make sure that you continue. You may have, if you look at the entire class, you can see how those individual students performed. On this report, these students are listed from, this is their percentile. So it's from low to high. So I could draw a line across here and know that these students are going to need some interventions. The Lexile range is on here. So I can really look and see if I'm assigning appropriate reading material. And then we have our instructional areas within, this is a reading report, and I can see how they performed, like on literature, informational text, and vocabulary. So again, just taking a few minutes each time and looking at a portion of a report can really be helpful for starting to get engaged in that data. So if you don't have a lot of time, you can still get a lot of information and look at some different things each time. You can also look at a class level report. This is one where you have those instructional areas down the side over here for math. And then across the top, the kids are grouped by the 10-point bands in which they scored. So you can see right away, these are the kids that are in the zone. We call them that zone of proximal development. This is the ones that are at that grade level area. These are the ones that need some scaffolding, and these are our students that need enrichment. So again, right away with a glance and just talking with 5 or 10 minutes, you can see, oh, these are some kids that we want to pay attention to this week. Maybe I'm going to take this group down here that needs scaffolding, or maybe these ones that need enrichment. So I just encourage you to take some time each week to look at a group. Here's another report that shows projected growth. The diamond shows the projected growth for the grade. The rectangle shows the actual growth. 6th grade did not meet their growth. And so you can start digging into the data to see why. Maybe they lost some instructional time, or maybe our curriculum, we need to take a look at our curriculum, our instructional strategies. 8th grade exceeded their growth over here. So maybe there's some best practices going on. So again, taking a little bit of time each time to look at these reports, or whatever reports, whatever data you have, is really important to start getting engaged with that data. So let's take a minute again to look at some questions and think a little bit about what you're doing at your school. What opportunities do you have for reading and for using data at your school? And what help do you need to support that? Jot down a little bit of an outline that maybe you can follow, or that that would be helpful to you. So some examples might be that you need some professional learning, and remember that Ian's funds can be allocated right now for the next couple years. So if you haven't taken advantage of those, that's something that you should be looking into. Title II-A funds are available. If you're in a position to be working on calendar, maybe you can start looking at taking some half days or something like that. But if nothing else, just taking a little bit of time each week. So let me give you just a few seconds to write down some ideas. Okay, I know we're moving pretty quickly, but hopefully this will give you some time to think a little bit. So let's move on to getting staff and students engaged with the data. So besides your teachers who meet regularly, you may also have some teaching assistants, aides, office staff, and facility managers in your buildings. And while they don't need the same amount of information as the teachers, it's important that they too have some knowledge of your goals and student learning. After all, they are interacting with the students and the parents and members of the community. And if they don't have information, they may, fill in the blanks with what they think is happening. Plus, if you have a development director or an admissions director, it's important that they are able to talk with donors and prospective families about the school. When I was a principal, I always felt like I was communicating a lot, but I still had some people who had not gotten the information needed or had the wrong information. I'm not sure you can ever over communicate. Always communicate your purpose. We wanted the staff as well as the students to get engaged with the data as well. So communicate in a number of ways. This could be by inviting them to some of your meetings or distributing an internal memo that they could also receive. If possible, you could have a separate meeting with them to share pertinent information both ways. For your students, be as consistent as possible with your assessment windows and procedures. Your students will know what to expect and what they should be doing. Your data will also be most consistent that way too. You want data to be meaningful to students so they can be engaged and better take ownership of their own learning. This can be done in a number of ways. Having data walls showing achievement in the rooms, hallways, or common areas could be put up. Setting growth goals with students and then having them lead conferences with their parents are a few ways to get them engaged. Many schools create videos. If you go to YouTube and put in NWEA map, you'll see lots of examples. And of course, celebrations are always a way to, celebrate with kids. Remember, it's always important to let the students know the purpose of the assessment, why you're giving it, be as consistent as possible. All students need routine and respond better to well-planned schedules, processes, and procedures. And please put your ideas in the chat. This is how we learn from each other. You guys are all doing things already in your buildings, and I would love to see your ideas. So if you could be putting your ideas and what you guys do in the chat, that would be great. So let's look at a few examples from some schools that I've visited and see what they've been doing. This is one data wall where you can see that they put a goal that they had on the NWA map test. 80% of the students will show a gain of 5 or more RIT points by the end of the year. And then over on the right-hand side, without naming the students, they put a green sticker for the ones that made their gain of 5 points. And so they met their goal. 63% of the kids made the goal. And then here's another one where they added up all the points, and that was their fall score. So they had a spring goal of this many points. And then on the green and the blue papers on the sides were the things that they were going to do to reach their goal. This is a goal setting worksheet that they use to fill in. And I think it doesn't show up here, but at the bottom, everybody signed it: student, teacher, and parent. And then of course, student-led conferences, I think a lot of you do, but we know that those help students develop ownership of their learning. It helps them build independence. They take pride in it. They can identify their own areas for improvement and share their knowledge and their skills. This was one where they celebrated with a party, and on the right-hand side, they were giving awards. And then I always like to tell this story about Emma. When I visited her school, she had this crown on. And at first I thought it was her birthday, and she had this crown says most growth right there. So I asked her to tell me about her crown. And she said, I had the most growth in the map reading test in the 3rd grade, so I get to wear the crown. And she was so proud of herself, right? That's what we want with kids. We want them to be excited about their learning and about their growth. And I don't know if she was the highest achiever or the lowest achiever in the class. I have no idea, but she had the most growth. And that's what we want. We want kids to be excited about their learning. So let's take another minute or so here and answer some more questions. How do you communicate with staff and students in your school, and how often? How consistent are you with both your informal and your formal assessments? So getting that data, using that data. What types of data do you share with students? How are students being empowered to set goals and monitor their own progress? And what are some activities you can use to engage students with the data, and what else can you implement? And what activities do you use to engage staff with the data, and what else can you implement? And let me give you about 30 seconds again. Okay, moving right along. So let's talk about parents. We want to talk about how to include parents. The purpose really of engaging parents is to strengthen that partnership with them, right? We want to have a strong partnership with our parents. The more that parents know about their child's learning and growth, the more they can be supportive. When they have access to data about the school, they can be better informed, and there should be no surprises. It seemed like every school I went to, as a principal, the parents were never satisfied with the middle school math program, thinking that unless their child took algebra in the 8th grade, they would not be well prepared for high school. To allay their fears, we started digging into the data and collecting as much information as possible. We were able to show that the students were growing in math. We worked with the local Catholic high school, learning what their expectations were to ensure students had as smooth a transition as possible. We also re-evaluated the math curriculum throughout our entire school to ensure teachers had the knowledge of the standards and the resources needed for their students. We kept the parents informed about the work we were doing. So it helped to allay their fears, to know that we use the data. We just had to go back to the data. Now, your message will reach parents more if you choose multiple ways to communicate. The parents at my schools would indicate that they wanted regular parent meetings, but with some exceptions, the same few seemed to show up when we had them. Now, with everyone getting comfortable with virtual meetings, you could easily schedule times to meet virtually, and parents won't need to rush dinner to get back to the school or need to get babysitters to attend. So actually, I had a virtual parent meeting with a school in Texas last night, and I'm in Washington State right now. So that was kind of cool. But you could consider having grade level meetings on a regular basis. You could discuss information with parents that's particular to those parents. And most schools have some type of a parent-teacher organization. There should always be a school employee represented at those meetings. If the principal can't attend, then you should have a teacher delegated to attend those meetings. So these are just some ideas. I know that you have a lot of different things that you do at your building, and you might want to put those in the chat to share with us. Here's some other ideas. You've got that parent-teacher association, some kind of association connection, grade level meetings, coffee hour with the principal or the teacher, weekly newsletter, surveys, and a report, school board or council, virtual on-site meetings, etc. So when you're getting ready to administer your interim or your summative assessments, be sure to let your parents know. Provide them with tips to help them prepare their students. Like NWA, most companies have a parent portal that you can direct parents to. I know we have sample letters that can be edited and sent out to your parents. Make sure that you consider your parent population. Do you need to provide information in languages other than English? After testing, do your homework and be prepared. Make sure you understand the data so you can deliver accurate information to the parents. Always triangulate your data. Don't rely on just one test for all your information on the student. You'll want multiple measures to make informed decisions such as observations, formative assessment strategies, homework projects, performances, self-assessments, etc. You know, we talked about student-led conferences and goal setting. Including parents in this process will help engage them. This is a parent report that we have, but it shows the student's achievement on there. The student has the 55th percentile. It shows their growth over time. It shows their growth percentile, has a link to it would be their state test, and a little narrative. So just make sure that you understand how to read it so you can explain it to the parent. We have a more in-depth student profile report that has a lot more information. So if a parent has a lot of questions, make sure that you understand the information and that you can speak to it so that you can answer questions and go in more in depth on the students' achievement and growth and learning for them, and some goals that you can set with them. So again, let's just take a little time here for some reflection and some looking at some questions. So what are some ways that you are currently building a relationship with parents? What are some other activities that you could implement? What types of communication do you use? How do you ensure that parents are heard? What assessment data do you have to share, and what do you need to better understand the data yourself? Oops. Sorry. And let me give you about 30 seconds again for that. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. Like I said, in the interest of time, I know we never have enough time. All right, let's go to our last section on talking about our stakeholders. Your external stakeholders are all of those that have an interest in your school or you want to get interested in your school. This would include parishioners, the ministries within the parish, like the Knights of Columbus, and groups like the Rosary Circle, the Food Pantry, etc. It also includes the local business community and even the public school. You've all heard of Warren Buffett, the Berkshire Hathaway billionaire investor. In their annual reports, he addresses the state of the company. He's known for being transparent, acknowledging what's going well, and letting his stakeholders know what hasn't gone so well. He also takes responsibility for mistakes made or things that need improvement, and praises those who have been part of what's gone well. Mr. Buffett tells us to remind your stakeholders of your mission and vision, and that we want them to care as much as you do. I've added some quotes and suggestions under the points about communicating with your external stakeholders. I just love some of the points in here that are made. Like in this one, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but equipping our children to positively influence a world that desperately needs them. I love that part of that quote. And on this one, he's talking about, transparent financial reporting and the impact that your donation makes on our programs. So it's just important that our external stakeholders care as much as we do, and that they're reminded of our mission and vision. Communication should be both ways. Most of the time we are disseminating information to our communities, but we also want to consider ways to gather information from our community. To inform important decisions, you want to find ways to gather information from those who will be impacted or who could have an impact on your school. You want your stakeholders to help you ensure that all students who want a Catholic education can get one. Take the time needed to bring people together in discussions or breakout sessions, or to send out a survey, or plan to attend coffee and donut after masses to solicit information on certain topics. We had a parish luncheon once a month that I would attend. Not only did I get a free lunch, well, actually, there was one lady that always made me pay. But anyway, I was able to meet many parishioners, and I had the opportunity to talk to them about the school. Consider the times of year that would work best for your community. In August, you could always talk about what's happened over the summer to prepare for the new school year and what overarching goals there are for the year. During Advent, you could emphasize the Catholic identity of the school and focus on some of the religious events that the students have participated in. Catholic Schools Week is a good time to give an update and let your community know what you're celebrating at the school. And the Lenten season and Easter, which we're in right now, is a good time to involve the community and share all the service projects the students have been doing. And then follow up at the end of the year with the summary of the year. There's many different types of communication. You notice many times in this talk today, we've talked about communication, right? You probably use many of these now. Some of them are very quick and easy. It doesn't take very long to tweet or write a short paragraph for the parish bulletin. It's just really making a conscious effort to get into the routine. You can always delegate to others too. If your administrative assistant is already creating the weekly newsletter, have them pull a couple highlights for the bulletin, or find someone who likes to tweet and just provide them the information. A lot of you are doing a lot of this now, but being purposeful about it, I think, is the key. You may have more formal types of communication as well, such as a quarterly or annual report. And this could give you the opportunity to go further in depth in your information. Or you may hold special meetings for an explicit purpose. Maybe a groundbreaking, something from the high schools about preparedness of incoming freshmen. I mentioned Warren Buffett earlier. He's not only an investment genius, but also an effective communicator. He says, without communication, there's no leadership, no investment in your school, and no results. Communication is at the heart of everything in business and life, and I believe especially in our Catholic schools. He has some tips that are useful for anyone who is communicating with their stakeholders. Be honest and transparent. If mistakes were made, own up to them. If a new curricular program isn't going well, let them know, and let them know what you're planning to do to change it. Use numbers and data to season the points you want to make. Explain the terminology and what numbers mean. Don't assume people will understand what something means, like a percentile rank. Use analogies and metaphors. Stay away from educational jargon and use plain English. Use facts to put things in realistic context. I talked earlier about our math dilemma at our school. After studying all the data, here's the statement that we put out. While we have not had as many students qualify for the advanced math classes in high school as we would like, 90% of our graduates are prepared for Algebra 1 and above when they leave our school. In their team meetings this year, our math teachers are reviewing each of the standards, determining the curriculum and instruction needed to meet those standards, and measuring student progress throughout the year to make sure we continue to reinforce those areas that are strong and determine changes needed to continually improve our program. A lot of words, but we felt that that was a pretty complete statement. So be sure to give credit to those who have helped with the goals. Be specific in your praise. And don't be afraid to admit what still needs work. And I had somebody tell me once that, yeah, but in our schools, you don't want to admit that something's not working or going right because, parents get all upset about that. But I think there's a fine line. You still need to make sure that you're being pretty transparent. And then, finally, how are you going to get there? What are you going to do? And make sure that you use action words. Don't do things like will know or will understand. And that as educators that we're going to use action verbs for what we do. So one last time to pause. Who are your community members? How often do you inform the community about the school? What types of communication do you use? What data do you have currently? What do you need? Oops. And take a few seconds here, and then we're going to just wrap up with the final slide. I think we're running out of time. Okay, you see, in conclusion, remember, data is not just numbers. Data is information. Data provides the information needed to determine your strengths, determine areas that need focus, to make decisions, to celebrate. And you also see all the way around that, I have communicate, 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 communicate. So I think I have only a couple minutes. I'm going to look at the questions. And if I don't get to them, I'm sorry, I missed the screen sharing at the beginning. So somebody asked about the results I was showing are from our MAP testing, the MAP growth test that we use at NWEA. Any suggestions for how many staff meetings a year? We at my building, what we did is we met every week for probably 45 minutes to an hour, but every week had a different focus. So we did not spend a lot of time on calendaring and things that could be done in memos because we didn't want to waste our time on that. So things that could be done quickly in memos were just sent out that way. So we tried to spend 1 week on some kind of a spiritual thing. And so we just had, each week had a different focus. So the first week was something to do with faith. The 1 week would be like data. And off the top of my head, I'm not going to remember the others. But then we were able to, like I said, build in that half a day a month. And that was really crucial because everybody's too tired to spend a lot of time after school. So that's what we would do. You have to figure out what works. And another school I was at, we were able to get out about an hour or two early once a week, which was really nice. So you have to figure out what works best for you and how you can make that work. Yes, I'd love to explain NWA map growth. It's too much to explain here, but if you want to visit our booth, anybody there can help you with that. Pace of communication with parents. I think it depends if you're a teacher, it's just set up a schedule, make it routine, some kind of a routine communication. Some parents are going to be, your helicopter and needy parents, and some kids might need something more regular. I think that's I'm happy to talk offline more about that if you have something, a specific situation or something you want to talk about.